So let me start by introducing myself. My name is Wasim. I work in the program product group. I look after certification or the certified devices strategy for Skype for Business and now coming Teams. I'm going to go through the certified IP phones and the discussion of the IP phones for Skype for Business Online and what's going to happen in Teams. So first we're going to cover updates, what's coming up with the new release of the IP phones, and we're going to roll back a bit and look into the overall portfolio and capabilities of the IP phones in Skype for Business Online. We have the common area phones as a good topic to cover this year. We have some improvements and enhancements there. And I'm going to close with the support for Teams. And this is a question that a lot of you folks have been bringing up. What is going to happen with my phones when I switch to Teams? So as a reminder, just to refresh everyone's mind, let's start with the IP phone portfolio and what kind of phones and what type of phones do we have support for Skype for Business Online. So today we have a certification program. This is the leading line of phones that we lead with in Skype for Business. And we have 3 partners playing there in this area with a range of certified devices: Polycom, Yealink, and Audio Codes. Let me give you a quick background on the program and how we get phones certified for Skype for Business. So we have a technical specification that we develop for the phones, and that's based on research, feedback, customer requests, and what we see fit there. And that document generally specifies everything that the phone needs to do technically and in terms of experience, UI, down to the color palettes and icons and how the design of the UI should look like. That document is handed over to partners that participate in the program, and we start with them a co-engineering effort where they develop the software for the firmware for the phones. They bring it to us, we do code engineering, and we do testing as we go. Once the firmware is ready, we go through the testing phases and validation, and this is where we do internal testing within Microsoft, which we call dog fooding. The phones are deployed for actual employees. They use it on a daily basis for their work to make calls, join meetings, and do the things they do. And we obviously collect telemetries and see what's happening there. After a while, we push that into external validation, where we deploy to customers, and a lot of you have been participating in that program. So customers actually deploy these phones and test them day in and out and make calls, and only when it passes all of that and we pass the feedback in terms of reliability and usability, it goes through testing and validation process where these phones go actually to a third-party lab other than Microsoft or the partners lab, and they go through hundreds, if not thousands, of test scenarios to make sure they meet the specification requirements and all the reliability and usability requirements. And only then when they pass these tests, they get certified for Skype for Business, and that's the guarantee that you get from both the partner and Microsoft. One of the things that we make sure is usable there in the program is that these phones has got to be a plug-and-play experience for you. As you know, these phones are unified communication phones. They're not just for making calls. They have your calendar information, your voicemail, they have your presence, your buddy list, and everything. And you buy that phone, you can plug it in and deploy it in your environment, which is either on-prem environment or online or dedicated or a hybrid environment. So we want to make sure that firmware works plug and play without any hassles or without any configurations required. So each partner actually develops a SKU, specific SKU name for Skype for Business certified phones. So when you buy it, you don't need to upgrade or update your firmware. You buy the phone with that SKU. The phone comes out of the box, preloaded with Skype for Business software, just to plug and play, whether it's online or on-prem. So the first thing in deployment, the same firmware, that ships out with the phones is for online and on-prem support. There's no need to change that firmware. There's no provisioning requirement. So if you take that phone home, unbox it, plug it into your ADSL, as soon as it acquires an IP address, all you need to do is authenticate. Put your username and password, and you're connected to your enterprise. For sign-in, there are a couple of options to simplify your sign-in and make it a low-touch sign-in experience. One of which we shipped last year is a web sign-in experience. Instead of using the phone screen or the keypad to put in your username and password, which might be complex if you have a complex password, you can actually use any standard browser to log into your phone. All you need to do is, on your phone, you click a button, you generate a code from Active Directory, and using a standard browser from your mobile, you can actually go and authenticate that phone. And finally, for basic operations day-to-day of the phone, we have an N-band setting updater that basically update and manage your phone through the Skype for Business N-band provisioning service. So to update your firmware whenever there's a new firmware, to change the policies of the phone, all the basic things that you want to do on a daily basis, you can do it within Skype for Business. Obviously, for these that choose to have advanced and enterprises, they need advanced management solution. There are partner solutions out there, and we are committed to deliver our own device management solution out of Skype for Business infrastructure service. Let's take a quick look at the phone ranges that are supported today for Skype for Business. So we have a range that goes from the entry level up to the high-end phones. The phones that you see here have been certified since last year. The ones with the circle are actually new, so fairly new. We got these certified within this year or the past 6 months or so. So at the low end or entry-level phones, we have 3 phones there from Polycom, Audicodes, and Yealink. And as you can see, the range goes up and the portfolio increased down to the mid-range phones where you have a collection of either only buttons with color screen, or even touch screen phones at the mid-range. And they go up to the high-end range there of the phones. I encourage you to pass by the booth, by the way. We have one of each of these phones of the high end. You can play around with it and see the screen and see how the experience resonates. Let's talk a bit about the firmware upgrade that happened this year. So with the program, we release a new firmware release every year. And this year, we had some updates coming to the phones. So on the left-hand side, you can see in 2016, we released our 4.5, release, which had some of the features there for tenant admin and end-user features. And the right-hand side, you can see the features that we released this year recently. So for tenant admin, we have logging improvements. We've done a lot of logging improvements to troubleshoot and basically troubleshoot the phones and find out what's happening there. We released the support for multiple emergency numbers, and this is something specifically important in Europe. We are releasing the dial plan normalization, something that enables you basically on the phone to do different normalization for the dialing plan. And we're looking into supporting the proxy WPAD or proxies for enterprises, basically for phones to support proxy settings. For end users, the features that we are releasing this year are meeting join reliability. So if you had chance to play around with the phones last year, there were certain scenarios that break out. When you're, for example, joining a federated meeting, there have been some issues there. So we've done a lot of reliability enhancements there for the joining. We've done enhancement to the phone lock experience. So previously, you can lock your phone to secure it from basically for privacy reasons and security reasons. We do not have that much flexibility in terms of what can I do as an end user, whether do I want to disable phone lock or not, do I want to change the timer or not. So we've done some improvements there. We're excited to be releasing hot desking. So this is environments where companies want to have hot desking in either phone booth or touch-down desks. And finally, UX and UI enhancements. Previously, what happened, partners developed their UI and emulated the Skype for Business skin, if I may say. This year, what we've done differently is that we handed over part of the specification, the design guidelines of Skype for Business. That is basically the document that have the specific UI requirements, the icons, color palettes, fonts, font size, down to the details of the workflow sometimes of how do I switch from one screen to the other and how the experience should look like. And this is based on the feedback, or the reason for that is the feedback we received from customers that, yes, I understand the phone is different than the app, and it should look differently and behave differently. It's an appliance. But sometimes it takes me a couple of seconds to realize what's going on, especially when I'm switching between my app and my phone. So we made sure that, at least for the visuals, it's super important to be consistent across the different apps and devices. So the calendar looks exactly like your calendar, whether it's on the phone or in the app. So each of the partners certified today, they release on different cadence. For example, you have Polycom is releasing the specification on 2 releases this year. So we have a release that happened in September. September is rough estimation. We have something that happened before or during September. So we have Polycom, Audio Codes, and Yealink. Each one of them is releasing their first release in September. That has some of these features. The green ones that were already supported from last year. So these are the same set of features that we talked about in the previous slide. It just shows you the distribution of which partner is going to support it by what time. This is just a screenshot example showing the UI improvements there. If you compare this to last year's release, you're going to see that these are the exact similar icons that you would see on your desktop app. So before we run out of time, I want to cover two more topics, one of which is the common area phones. This is just a small story I put together here explaining why it has been such a challenge getting common area phone support. And if you had a chance to work with one of the traditional PBX providers today in the market, you realize that any PBX or telephony provider, they start actually with a simple phone that is a common area phone. That's a non-user phone. And to get that to a user phone level, they have to add a bunch of features and services and servers on top of the phone to get into where the experience becomes a user-centric phone. So you take Cisco, for example. You have a phone, you deploy it there, you plug it in, you give it an extension, that's a common area phone. You want to give that phone to a user, you actually add services and licenses for presence, calendar, single sign-on, visual voicemail, and sometimes it's a third-party ads that you need to put on the phone. The problem with, or the challenge that happened with Skype for Business and Link previously is that we come from a user-centric phone. The system, the service, back from even OCS was designed to be a unified communication platform. I create a user, that user is a UC user. I give that user a phone, that phone has the calendar, the voicemail, everything in it. So now the challenge became, how do I strip out all these features and capabilities to bring it down to a common area phone level? And that's what we've been busy working on for online. So let's look at what's coming up for common area phone. So first of all, a phone that is a low-entry phone for a common area phone, we already have that supported. And as you saw this year, we're adding a couple of devices also certified there. So you have the small or entry level phone, support that. To restrict some capabilities on the phone naturally, for example, on common area phone, you want to restrict the phone from getting into do not disturb mode or disable the PC port for security purposes or anything. So this is something you can do today using the device profiles from the partner. This is something that we're super excited about, which is a specific SKU or a specific license for common area phones and dialing plan. So traditionally, you don't want to be paying a full license on that phone. That phone does not do IM and presence and conference. It's a simple phone sitting there for someone to make a call or receive a call when they need to. Similarly, for dialing plan, if you're getting dial plan from Microsoft, you don't want to be paying subscription on that phone on an ongoing basis. So this is something we're going to be releasing very soon. And finally, very quickly, we are releasing a provisioning tool to enable IT Pro to provision multiple phones at the same time without having to use a username and password for each one of them. We're releasing a lifetime token support so that these phones do not sign out, and they're not like users whenever you change your password, your phone signs out. This is a phone that will remain signed in. And we're doing some improvements to the UX to basically reflect a common area phone usability lock screen. And finally, hot desking, which is a feature by itself, but traditionally known part of the common area phones. So before I close, I want to go to the important topic of this year that you've all seen the announcement around Teams and that Skype for Business Online is converging to Teams. And the question that begs itself, and we hear it often, is that I'm buying phones, what's going to happen to my phones on Skype for Business environment when I switch my users to Teams? So I put a couple of questions here, and I put it in a form of answers, and happy to take your questions after the session during the Q&A. So the first question, the simple one actually, is, will my phone work? And the answer is yes. We are planning to support all Skype for Business certified phones today for online. So any phone that is listed under certified for Skype for Business online is going to be supported for Teams, whether it's third-party IP phone or a Link Phone Edition. What's going to change on the phone? So the phone have multiple experiences there. This is the list of features that are not going to change. So authentication, calling, the presence in the picture, corporate directory, joining a Skype for Business meeting. All these experiences are not going to change. They're going to be as is. You're not going to feel any difference there. What's going to change, however, is joining a Teams meeting. So you are on your Skype for Business phone, whether you switch to Teams and you're joining your own meeting from the phone, or you're joining a meeting that you were invited to, the experience there are going to change. You're going to be able to do the most important things in a meeting environment, where I can click to join a meeting, I see the reminder of my meeting. When I join, I can add a participant, I can mute myself, and so on. Some of these capabilities are still under investigation, and we're looking to support them, but they're not going to be supported by the release time, which is, by the way, the support is scheduled for December timeframe. And these are the experiences that we're still looking into and investigating, which aren't necessarily the important ones that you would want to do on a phone level. For example, remove a participant from a meeting or lock the meeting and so on. So what else do I need to know about the phone supports and team? First of all, the branding is going to remain for now the Skype for Business, because Skype for Business, as you know, is the infrastructure that powers Teams. There will be no impact whatsoever to the server. So if you're on-prem deployment, you have your phones, there are going to be no impact in there. However, your phones are going to be supported to join Skype for Teams meeting. There's going to be no requirement for any tenant admin experience, any switches to flip, any configuration, no even requirement to update your firmware. We're going to do that transparently. So once you switch your users to Teams, their phones are simply going to work. That's it for now. Again, we're going to take questions end of the session. Please, if you have any question, bring them on. And we're going to be on the exhibit today on the floor. Now I'm going to hand it over to David.
Great. Thanks very much, Wasim, for that presentation. My name is David Groom. I work on the partner engineering team in the Skype group. And today I'm going to talk with you a little bit about Skype Room Systems certification. Before we start, I'd like to get a show of hands. How many people have been out on the demo floor and actually played around with Skype Room Systems? Okay, great. That's really good to hear. How many have actually deployed Skype Room Systems at your company? Even better. Great. Very good to hear. So as you may know, if you attended Greg's presentation yesterday, one of the promises that we made with Skype Room Systems is, taking the previous experience you have with meeting room devices where it may take as long as 8 to 12 minutes to set up a meeting, and reducing that to a very short time in terms of being able to get up and running on a meeting. If you played around with the Skype Room Systems in the demo booth, you know that it takes about 5 seconds or so to get a meeting started once a meeting has been scheduled with the system. Well, along with that promise of making meetings easier to join, we also want to make sure that IT pros and facilities planners are also enabled to deploy those Skype Room systems very quickly and in a pain-free manner. So the session objective today is to make sure you understand the hardware options that you have available to you via the Skype certification program that allow you optimized Skype Room Systems user experience. The other thing that I want to do is make sure that you understand some key considerations that you should be making when you think about audio and video in these meeting room experiences. And before we start, I'd like to talk a little bit about a customer case we had a couple weeks ago that Sam told me about, and I thought was a perfect example of where that customer could have really taken advantage of our certification program and our certified devices. In this case, a customer called up. They just set up their Skype Room Systems device. In terms of setup, everything was pretty easy, I would say. They were pretty happy with the ease of deployment. But they were having terrible problems with the call quality of the Skype Room Systems. So we immediately jumped on the call and did some troubleshooting, pinpoint kind of troubleshooting with the customer. And we learned a few things. Number one, that there was a lot of echo in the call. And the second thing we heard that it was a very large room and the call quality was just generally very bad. And finally, the customer noted that when they went to the UI to mute the device, which had HID integration on a mute button on the device itself, the audio device, that the HID integration didn't work. So if you muted the Skype Room Systems UI, it didn't show up on the device. So we did a little bit of Q&A with the customer, and it turned out that they weren't using a Skype certified device. And a lot of the problems that they had encountered could have been alleviated by choosing a Skype certified device. Because as I'll show you later on in the presentation, we spend a lot of time making sure that the devices that we certify have good call quality, good audio quality, good video quality, so that you don't hit those kind of problems that I described earlier. So let's move along here. So you may know that the Skype certification program covers many different devices. And as I said, today I'm going to be covering Skype Room Systems exclusively. If you've been to the booth or if you're using Skype Room Systems today, you know that there's a few key components, few key hardware components in a Skype Room Systems device. One being the actual compute itself. In the case of the early Skype Room Systems that were shipped via Logitech, we use a Surface Pro, which is enclosed in a console that sits on the front of on the tabletop in the meeting room. That's connected via USB to an audio device, and we also have a camera that's connected via USB as well. So we certify each of those hardware components that I just mentioned. The one hardware component that we aren't specifically targeting during our certification testing is the front of room display, which you may have one or two at the front of the room to show the content or the video gallery. So we don't certify that, but we do a lot of testing with different displays. So the focus in terms of what we test and how we test roughly falls into three different areas. First, we want to test for the audio and video experience. And so in terms of audio and video, we have some objective testing that we do based on some technical specifications which are available online, and I'll show you the URL that you can look at later to kind of dig into the specs yourself. Second of all, we do subjective testing. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that the system is configured just as you would be using it in your meeting rooms, and we do a lot of functional testing, making sure that, for example, that HIT integration I talked about is working. If you hit the mute button on the Skype Room Systems UI, that's reflected on the mute button on the audio device. Or if you hit call end on the Skype Room Systems console, that's also ending the call, or you can end the call from that audio device itself. And then finally, the other thing that we do when we test is we take we have a very keen awareness of making sure that we're testing based on meeting room size. We want to make sure that we're providing you good guidance in terms of what meeting room size that each audio or video device is best suited for. And we'll talk about this a little bit later on how we draw those conclusions. Finally, if you're familiar with Skype Room Systems, you know that the complete software stack is Windows 10 plus our Skype Room Systems v2 application and any kind of OEM extension application that may be loaded on that. So we're testing against all three of those software components. So let's talk a little bit about the audio devices. Roughly speaking, the audio devices fall into three different categories. The first being what we call a group speakerphone. And you can see on the top row there a range of different group speakerphones that we use. Some may be suited more for small or huddle rooms, others for large rooms. And if you go out to our TechNet site, we have a page where we list all the requirements and the recommended room size for each of these devices. If you look at the middle row, we have group speakerphones, but the ones that are meant for larger rooms, for example, medium or large rooms. In this case, the group speakerphones have extension or satellite mics, which allow you to go into larger meeting room spaces. And then finally, we have a third class of audio devices which have integrated cameras. That would, of course, be the kind of meeting room scenario where you'd have an audio device and a camera at the front of a room. For example, maybe a huddle room or something like that. Or in the case of the Polycom CX5100, you may decide that you want to put the camera in the middle of the room so that you have a 360-degree view of the meeting room participants. As far as audio testing goes, we test a number of different audio characteristics. And something that you may not know about, but we spend a lot of time working on, is we want to get to the point with Skype Room Systems where we're offloading all the DSP processing to the OEM audio device itself. In the past, you may not know it, but Skype has done DSP processing both on the Skype client in addition to the processing that might be done on the audio device. For larger rooms, it's better to have offloaded audio as opposed to cascaded audio. So what we're doing is we're working with the different audio manufacturers to ensure that we're testing not only in cascaded mode, but that we're testing in audio offload mode. You may ask yourself, what kind of things does the audio offload do as far as processing? Well, things like, for example, echo cancellation or noise suppression. These are the kinds of things that the devices are normally doing in the DSPs on the device. Once the device has passed certification and we feel it's met our audio offload requirements, we actually, in the Skype Room Systems application, we check to see if the USB ID for that device is present, and if present, we do offload. If we don't detect the ID, then we'll default to cascaded mode. Some other things, as I said earlier, that we do when we test the audio devices is keep in mind the distance from the talker to the microphone to make sure that we're keeping in mind the optimal distance that you might want to be using this device in a meeting room. And then finally, we test in both anechoic or quiet and reverberant noisy type test environments. Typically speaking, if you attended the presentation yesterday that Greg gave on Skype Room Systems, we think of meeting room sizes in 4 different categories at the current time. One being a focus, next being small, medium, and large type rooms. And rather than think about room dimensions, in terms of audio, what we do is we think of the distance between a speaker's, the talker, and the microphone. So when you take a look, for example, at a candidate device that you might be looking at for your meeting room, you want to make sure you understand the distance that you expect the talker will be from that microphone, and whether that microphone will, for example, be at the front of the room or maybe in the middle of the room. In the cases of large rooms, we have the interesting situation where you may have extension mics. So you want to make sure that you're covering all the potential areas that speaker or talkers could be in that meeting room, and that they're within a good distance from those satellite mics. What I thought I'd do next is give you some actual examples of what I call the good, the bad, and the ugly. I'm going to provide you some samples of devices that experience poor audio echo cancellation and double talk. So in the case of echo, what we're doing is we're listening to a single talker and determining whether there's any echo leak coming back. And in the case of the double talk, we have 2 talkers counting to 5, not simultaneously, but handing off to each other, counting to 5. And as you'll be able to tell, you get a lot of loss on a poor double talk device. So let me play you some samples here and see if you can hear this. So here's the case of good echo suppression.
We tried to replace the coin, but failed.
The set of china hit the floor with a crash.
The jacket hung on the back of the wide chair. A pound of sugar costs more than eggs.
It doesn't make a lot of sense what they're saying, but it gives you a good example of a device that, it goes on, by the way, of a sample that has good echo suppression. Now let's take a look at a device that has really bad echo leak.
We tried to replace the coin, but failed.
The set of china hit the floor with a crash.
The jacket hung on the back of the wide chair. A pound of sugar costs more than eggs. The jacket hung on the back of the wide chair.
So as you can see, in the case of the first example, you have continuous good echo cancellation, but in the second example, around the 11-second point, you get that garbled signal. And so that's what we want to stay away from, and that's what we do a lot of testing in our labs to ensure that we're tackling that problem. Next, I'll show you an example of double talk. This is the good example, where they're counting to 5.
5, 5, 5,
5, 5, 5, 5,
5.
I think in both cases,
The shaky barn fell with a loud crash.
Pluck the bright rose without leaves.
A pencil with black lead writes best.
The glow deepened in the eyes of the sweet girl.
Okay. So as you can see, there's two talkers, and they're kind of handing off to each other, and what we're trying to do is make sure that you can hear each voice distinctly. Now let's listen to the bad example. Same recording.
5, 5,
5, 5, 5.
The shaky barn fell with a
Bright rose without leaves.
pencil with black lead.
The glow deepened in the eyes.
So as you can tell, things can very quickly go bad in the case of the poor device. So let's move along. Here's a shot of our lab setup. And what I want to show you here is basically that we're striving for repeatable, measurable results when we test these devices in a reverberant room. You have the two talkers that I just showed you, so we're able to do both the echo cancellation and the type of double talk tests we're doing. Because, and these kind of test setups we share with our OEM partners so that they're able to set up the same conditions, and they're able to share information if we're trying to debug a problem in the process of certifying a device. So in the previous example, we had a reverberant room, which is kind of a noisy environment. This is the case of an anechoic chamber that we have at Microsoft up in Redmond. And we're testing for echo cancellation in this case with a single device under test. And here's another kind of look at the room. So the main point here is that we're striving for repeatable, measurable results. Finally, this is something that I took from our test spec. It shows you that we're able to basically set up a system where we can set the mic to different distances from the talker and basically measure and determine what the optimal meeting room size might be for a particular device. So next I'd like to talk about video. In the case of video, you can think of maybe 3 different categories. The first being a single camera, which you'd have at the front of the room, in this case a webcam on the top. The second row would be more of an integrated type design, as we saw earlier, with audio integrated into the unit. That might be at the front of the room. And then finally, we have the class of devices that we've been certifying recently, which are PTZ cameras. It allows you to control the pan, tilt, zoom on the device. So over the course of the last year, we've added a lot of devices in this category, providing you more selection when you outfit your rooms. As is with the audio testing, we have objective testing that we do in our test labs, and we keep the testing of the room size itself in mind when we're testing. Let me show you an example of an actual room we have set up in our lab, in the room environment. In this case, we test for color quality from a color chart, where we're able to compare the image that comes in from a camera with a kind of a reference image to make sure that the colors are coming through as they're expected to come through, that the image is being tested according to an objective test criteria, and that there's no distortion. Another thing that's important to keep in mind when you're choosing a camera for a meeting room is the field of view. If you're in a huddle room, you'll want a very wide field of view because the attendees will be very, very close to the camera if the camera's at the front of the room. If you're ever in a larger room, you can go with a lesser field of view. But that's something that we test for and assess as well. Finally, we have the compute devices, which you may have seen on the test room floor. Logitech is shipping now. These other devices will be shipping shortly from Crestron and Polycom, Lenovo shipping early next year. Some testing that we do with these devices is basically video ingest testing because we have HDMI in. We do a lot of what we call plug fests, where we take a number of different laptops and plug them in and out to ensure that we're basically reenacting a real user-type scenario that you'd have in a meeting-type environment. And finally, we test OEM extensions if you have room controls integrated into those onto the console. This may be a little bit difficult to see, but we do hit integration testing. If you can make it out there on the Skype Room Systems console, there's a mute button. If you toggle the mute on and off, you should be able to see the LED on the audio device toggle on and off as well. So we want to make sure that the hit integration is working very well. Some things that are coming up in terms of Skype Room Systems support. One is that we have our OEM partners working on automatic firmware updates. So all of these devices typically have native firmware support. And we want to make sure that from an IT pro perspective, they're easier for you to manage. So the OEMs are developing firmware updates that will actually push through Windows Update silently so that you don't have to worry about managing firmware and you're up to date on latest firmware improvements. And then finally, another area that we're working on right now in terms of device category is we want to get into the larger rooms eventually. So we're looking at adding some test criteria for DSP mixers. And that'll allow you to maybe leverage existing microphones and speakers you may have in some of those larger rooms. Finally, as a call to action, I encourage you to reference the following URLs that I've listed here when you're setting up your Skype Room Systems or planning for Skype Room Systems device deployments. By using these references, you can really make sure that when you set up your systems, that they are optimized for both audio-video experience as well as the console, the compute itself. Okay. With that, thank you very much, and I'll hand things over to Greg, who's going to talk a little bit about manageability.
Thanks, Dave.
Yep.
Great. So my name is Greg Barabalt, and I'm on the program management team in the product group for Skype Room Systems. If you were in the room yesterday, I took us through a kind of an end-user-facing tour of all the capabilities of a typical Skype Room system as it's deployed in various size conference rooms. Today, I'm going to focus more on the deployment aspect, selection, deployment, management, and kind of the administrative functions rather than end-user. And to do that, I wanted to start with kind of a basic system overview, how the systems are made, kind of what components are in there. All Skype Room systems are based on a Windows 10 core, so they're all built on Windows 10 Enterprise IoT. Typically, you get that image installed on the machine that you buy through one of the OEMs that provide the systems. Today, Logitech is the only provider you can actually get one ordered and delivered. You can pre-order from Crestron and Polycom, and then Lenovo will be coming early next year. Most of those systems will ship with an image. There's another method where you can actually build the system yourself. The one I have up here, for example, is the Logitech. It can be, actually one of my colleagues last night suggested that I assemble it in the room and show you just how that's done. That was beyond my risk profile for this particular meeting, but they're fairly easy. They come with a set of tools. You can just put the things together. So if you have Surface Pro 4 or the new Surface Pro devices already available, you can actually buy docks and assemble and image the devices yourself. But they all, regardless of who you get them from, the software, the image that's on those is exactly the same and provided essentially by us with the drivers appropriate for each OEM. And so they're all managed and deployed the same way. The one thing that's new now with our version 3.0.12 is support for Creators Update. So I saw a lot of hands that went up earlier about people that already have Skype Room Systems deployed. In some of those rooms over the last couple months, you may have seen a message pop up that says we're ready to update to the Creators Update. That was not intentional, so I apologize for that message coming up. There was an error in the way that we were basically insulating those machines from Windows Update and taking Creators Update or getting offered the update. So that may have presented itself to some users. Creators Update at this point is fully supported, and so our newest app update, which is updated automatically through the store, solves any compatibility issues with that particular Windows version. Because these machines are based on Windows 10, they're deployed and managed very much in the same way that you would manage any other Windows PC in your enterprise. So if they're domain joined, you would apply policy in a very similar way. If you're using a tool like SCCM, you can apply patches and access the machine to install files in the same way that you would manage any other Windows PC. So in a sense, the IT pros would have a single pane of glass for managing all PCs and rooms within the enterprise, which I think is a huge value proposition for the Skype Room system. Like I mentioned, the Skype app itself, this is a UWP app that's shipped through the Windows Store. And this app will update automatically, so each night we do a check for a new version. Actually, each night we recycle the machine anyway, and if there's an update available, we get it installed, reboot, and it's ready to go for the next morning, just to make sure everything is functional and nice and clean for the next day. And then the thing is, within these rooms, things can fail. Hardware does fail over time. Software can have issues over time, obviously. And users can come in and kind of mess with things. So you could have a machine that's sitting on the tabletop, and somebody decides they want to plug their laptop in, and they go and rip an HDMI cable out of the back of the TV or out of the dock and plug it into their laptop. That's great. They're going to have a productive meeting, and they're going to get their stuff shown on the screen. The next folks that come into that room are not going to have a very good experience. So we want to make sure that from an administrative point of view, you're aware of things that are going on in the room, equipment that's failing, and things like getting alerts for changes in the configuration. So if a screen goes away, if a camera gets unplugged, a mic gets unplugged, you'll get informed of that. So every machine is set up with 2 user accounts out of the box. One that's called the Skype account. That's a local machine account. And another local machine account that's an admin account. The default password for both of these is SFB, Skype for Business acronym. And so I'll take you through, and you'll see what that means and why you would use this. But you would go into this administrative mode to install any management software, agents that you want installed on the machine. Users would never be in this mode. They're going to always be in Skype. The machine will boot to the Skype account, auto log in every time the machine boots. And that is a fully locked down, the way our provisioning script runs, that machine becomes fully locked down. If there was a keyboard plugged into it, the flag key doesn't work, Alt-Tab doesn't work, nothing, they can't get into the machine in any way. On the console itself, all they see is our app full screen. There's no way to get to taskbar, start menu. They can't install anything. They can't run anything. You get the point. This is a well-protected console that isn't going to be affected by end users coming in and kind of messing around with it. From a deployment requirements point of view, we require that the machine, the dock itself, the console, is provisioned with a Skype for Business Online, and I'm speaking only of the Office 365 deployment model. but a Skype for Business Online Plan 2 account for regular conferencing, which I believe is E3 and higher. And if that's going to be a telephone room, a telephony-based room, and you want to have a phone number associated and dial in and out of the room, that would require a Plan 3 account, which would be E5. And then the device can behave like an enterprise voice endpoint. It has a phone number people can call into the room, and you can dial out and dial into a bridge or whatever you need to do. The room account also needs to have an Exchange mailbox. And the Exchange mailbox is there to receive calendar invites when people invite the room to meetings. So in Outlook, if somebody adds a location, adds a room, that room is set up in Exchange as a resource account. It gets added automatically to the to line and receives the invitation, and then that's processed, and it actually will show up as a single-click join button on the device home screen. The room does not need an Exchange license. It only needs to be assigned a mailbox and created as a resource account, and I'll take you through how that gets done. So first, I'll show you how it gets done in PowerShell. So essentially, you're creating a new mailbox, and the only special thing here is this slash or dash flag, or dash room flag, and that indicates that this is a room account. And as such, it'll appear in the rooms list in Outlook and have the room icon, and it wouldn't require the license. You also need to set the password to not expire. So what you don't want to have is this machine 30 days after deployment have the password expire and not have, that morning people come in and the machine can't sign in. These are the steps that you would take to assign the license. So I've highlighted the things that basically you need to set, and then on that last one, this is for Skype Online. You would set the device name, the UPN of that device, and then also provide the phone number that you want to allocate to that machine. And now, with that simple commandlet, the machine is dialable and can answer calls. And there's also UI for all of this. That's what I'll show you in a moment, but these are the commandlets in case you wanted to script it. You're going to set up a few hundred rooms. Scripting all of that is how you obviously would want to do it. The next step after you set up your resource account, the mailbox, is to set up automatic processing. So today, if you receive an invite in Outlook, you accept or decline based on your own availability or desire to go to that meeting. A room, when it gets invited, you want that room to process based on a set of rules. So if the room is already booked, for example, you want to auto-decline so people know that that room isn't available. If it is available, it'll auto-accept based on additional conditions. Maybe it can't be booked for recurrences that go out more than several months. Maybe not recurrences at all. Maybe it can't exceed a certain length of time. So you can craft your own rules. You can also set an additional response here so that after the room is invited, if it auto-accepts, it can actually send a message back to inform the user what that room is capable of doing. So I just said, have a great meeting here, but you could write a nice message that explains, hey, this is a Skype room system. You can just show up and one-click join. We have a camera there. We have a microphone there. Kind of set their expectations so that when they get in the room, they know exactly what to do, and it's, they're in the meeting nice and quick. So once all of your accounts are set up, it's time to actually set up the device. So using a USB stick, you can go to this, well, you can't go to the link because you don't have this PowerPoint. But if you clicked on that, it would take you to a download tool, an MSI, that installs the imaging software for creating a USB thumb drive that you would plug into the dock, boot the machine, and begin the imaging process. So there are some changes you can make. So if you want to do a simple one machine deployment, maybe just as a test, you can provision everything you need in the script and set the machine up. Or you can actually design that script in a way that you can image multiple machines. They shut down at the end of the process. You can bring them out to the rooms and kind of boot them in place and finish the provisioning and setup process there. After the machines are all, after you have the image all ready, you would install any necessary language packs and just pop it into the dock and reboot. The whole process actually is kind of a 15-minute or so imaging process to get the new machine up and running, and you're good to go and deploy. So this is a little bit of an eye chart, but I have a second set that zooms in. So after the machine is imaged, we have a set of options that are just for the Skype experience itself. Those are defined in an XML file. This can actually be delivered to the machine over any system management software. So you need the ability to access the file system. You can push this XML file onto the machine, trigger a reboot, and it'll adopt the new settings. So within these settings, you can do things like turn on or off auto screen sharing. So screen sharing is a capability where if somebody comes into a room that has a room system dock, that every single Skype Room Systems machine has an HDMI ingest cable. And that cable can be plugged into any laptop that you bring in and ingest into the meeting. Not everybody wants to automatically take content that's brought into the room and feed it into the online meeting. Some people want a switch, and we have a button on the UI to do that. So this option lets you turn on the auto detection of the HDMI and auto sharing into the meeting. A second option, kind of in the interest of privacy and security, is to hide the meeting names. Since generally these are deployed in shared public environments, we don't necessarily want every meeting invitation name or the subject name shown on that screen where everybody can see. So if it is a sensitive room or installed in a more public location, you don't want people seeing titles of the meetings, you can turn on a feature that will hide, kind of suppress the meeting name. The next block is for the user account. So here you can provision both the user name and the password that you're going to use for that particular room. And you can also now set up, and this is one of our newer features, you can set up the ability to deliver feedback back to the IT Pro, back to you, to any email address you provide here. If that's turned on, what users in the room will see is a send feedback button on the home screen. And tapping that brings up a little message box. They can type some feedback about the room, perhaps an error that occurred, something that went wrong. And they can also, if this send logs is on, you can also get full logs, and then those can be delivered to us to support if you need to make a call to us and figure out what's happening in the room. So the next set of settings in the XML is to define which audio and audio devices you want to use for that machine. So generally there's a few. Because they're surface-based, they'll have integrated audio, and that will show up in the list. But most people are plugging in fact, everybody really is plugging in a USB peripheral of some kind, whether it's an all-in-one soundbar with a camera and microphone or something on the table, or, like David said, the new DSP models that are maybe distributed around the room. Either way, you need to make a selection as to which input and output devices you want to use. The microphone obviously is to pick up sound from the room and deliver it into the meeting. The speaker for communications, that property is to set which speaker the remote participants, when they speak, you hear in the room. So that one is usually something like the on-desk sound device like this one. This is both the mic and the speaker. The next one, the default speaker, is actually about other content that's in the meeting and how that gets played back. So that's for something like ingested HDMI-based content. If I plug in my HDMI cable and I play a video in the meeting, where is that audio going to come from? And I can actually send that to a different place, maybe HDMI to the screens at the front of the room. And I have speakers built into the front of room. I can play my audio from there. Probably sounds a little more appropriate to have the audio come from the same location as the video. So this next block is about theming. And it was about, I think about 6 months ago, we released a feature to provide custom themes. You can actually specify one of our built-in themes. There's about 10 or 12 of those. Or you can design your own theme, add that, deliver it to the device, kind of over the network, along with the settings file. And have the machine restart into a new theme. I'll show you what that looks like. And so what we did was actually provide a Photoshop template that describes how you lay out your image to render appropriately on the device. This is a little bit non-trivial to do, in fact. So the image actually is quite large, so it's 3840 by 1080. And the reason that it's so wide is that we have the opportunity to paint on 2 front-of-room screens, and that's a panoramic picture. So this image actually gets stretched across both screens at the front of the room. Also reuse a part of that, it's the right-hand part of this image. We reuse that on the console. And on the console, when you're in a meeting, you only see a narrow sliver of it over on the left-hand side with the clock and some information about the meeting, while your call controls are on the right. So we show you with some lines where things will line up in those different layouts so that you can, if you wanted to put a logo, you could decide to put it in a location that it doesn't get kind of occluded by maybe a front bezel or the edge of the console. So this is available for download. If you go to the TechNet site for deploying Skype Room Systems, most of these assets are up there for you to download, and this Photoshop template is there as well. So let me I'm going to switch over to a demo machine here and give you a view of what the room system looks like. Let me see if I can quickly fix that focus. That look pretty good? No. That's pretty good, right? So basically what I'm doing here, so you know, is I've got a camera that's pointed at my console so you can see what I'm doing as I touch. That's feeding into my laptop just through the USB. It's just running camera app. And my HDMI output from my laptop is actually going back into the Rigel, or to the Skype Room Systems, as an HDMI ingest. And so I'm presenting. So if I were to stop presenting, you will not see my camera source anymore or my laptop. Now what you see is our default front of room screen. And if I start presenting again, now I'm taking that HDMI ingest source back in. So this is useful for rooms that are used without even joining the online meeting. This is just me in a room with people talking, I want to share something. This is how I would do it. So first things, let me jump into the admin, into the settings page. Again, the password is just SFB by default. And this is where you'll see most of the UI for some of the same things I showed you in XML. So here's my password and user information. Here's where I would select my audio devices. So I've got this Plantronics device up here. I'm going to use that for all 3. I could set an address to send feedback. We only have one monitor, so I can't turn on dual monitors. I'll leave the rest set up as is. For theming, I've kind of pre-provisioned a custom theme, which is based on the one that you saw the template for. So I'll select that one, and you'll get a look at what that looks like. And that last button, it said Windows Settings. Let me just show you that real quick. Come on up. Oh, it's still signing in. Okay. Yeah, after you save settings, it goes through a sign-in process again. Well, the last option was just to go to admin. So if I tapped that, it would bring up an admin login prompt, and it would actually take me out of the Skype account into the admin account where I can install software, install management apps, whatever I need to do. And then I just log out and back into Skype, and the room is ready to go again. So the last bit I want to show really quickly in the minute we have left here is the UI version of the commandlets for provisioning the room. So here, this is just in the Office 365 Admin Center. I've already created the room account that I'm using, which is just called ConfRoom Orlando 1. I could add a new resource here, or I can go in and set up some of my policies. So these are where you would configure the auto response policies. So this one is, you'll see, allowing for repeating meetings. And I can set up some rules here. This doesn't have all of the capabilities that the commandlet has, but it's still pretty rich. It does most of what you'll need. So this is the basic user information. That also now shows up as a user. So that account you'll see here is just a user account. And this is where I would go and manage passwords and that sort of thing for the room, assign licenses, etc. In the Skype console, this is the place where I could come in and activate the room in Skype or assign phone numbers. Again, that's what I showed in the commandlet earlier, but again, just the UI example. And then the last bit I wanted to show was actually an example of what the monitoring and alerting experience would look like. I don't have time, unfortunately, to design a dashboard and show you what that would look like, but let me give you a peek at what the logs look like. So this is basically event log information that comes out of the Skype Room system itself that we put in based on different types of events that we see. And our management agent sends those up to OMS. And we can filter them and alert on them and show them on a dashboard, all kinds of great things. This machine hasn't been active for a couple of days, so I'm going to actually have to zoom back. And so you'll see here I've got from actually just about a day that machine was online, I've got about 421 events that had come in. Now most of those are just heartbeats. We're just knowing that the machine is online. So this is what I would use if I wanted to design a dashboard that shows me all of the room systems in my company, which ones are online, which ones maybe we haven't heard from in a little while and are maybe having connectivity problems. I would look at that heartbeat. I want to actually show you what one of the events would look like. So if I filter this down, now I have just a few events, and I'm going to pick one that looks like maybe an error. Here's one. Let's see what happened here. So in this case, it looks like my front of room display is healthy, my mic was healthy, conference room speaker is healthy, but my camera status is unhealthy. So it looks like somebody must have come into the room, unplugged the camera from the dock, and maybe used it in their own laptop. So this is obviously the raw view. This is just the blob that we send up on that event. Within OMS, now you could create your custom filters and actually find that event and trigger an alert. You could wake somebody up in the middle of the night if you needed to say, this machine is having a problem, went offline, this is the description, and here's how we need to fix it. So with that, I think I'm a minute over, and I wanted to preserve 15 minutes for Q&A. So if we could bring up David and Wasim again, we'll take questions. We have mics in each of the aisles, so you can step up to anyone, and between us, we'll answer whatever questions you have.
Can I start over here?
Go ahead.
Hi. For the devices that were supported on Skype Business Online, that included the Polycom Group Series. Will that also be supported in a Teams environment? And will there be any whiteboarding coming to the Skype Room system, Miracast support, and potentially touchscreen support if we're doing whiteboarding?
Okay, well, maybe repeat it, make sure we got it all. First was, what's the story for Polycom Group Series devices with Teams and interop with Teams? Why don't I take that first? So we are currently working with Polycom on that to make sure that we do have a good solution for folks that are on Group Series today and want to make the transition to Teams. I can't give a timeline for that. It's a fairly substantial engineering effort. I can tell you that we're not going to have anyone go and move to Teams until we're ready with devices like that to make sure we do have a good experience. I missed the first thing you said, but I heard Miracast and touchscreen support.
Yeah, so on the Skype Room system, Miracast support's been on the roadmap for a while, but we haven't seen that yet.
Yeah. So directly, it is still on our roadmap, and so I can't really give a good time frame for it. What I can say is Polycom actually has an accessory device called the Pano that they're showing, and that actually would work with any Skype Room System dock, not only Polycom's. It's an HDMI ingest device. You plug that in, and it gives you Apple AirPlay and Miracast, and actually multiples, so they can do a gallery of like 4 different devices that are all streaming into the meeting at the same time. So that device they're showing off. Direct in the platform itself, I can't give you a time frame for that, but it is something we're still looking at. You can do it on Surface Hub,
Yep.
not on Room System.
Okay, and the whiteboarding, so obviously with Surface Hub, they've got the new whiteboard. It's going to be opened up to any kind of Windows 10 device to do whiteboarding between devices. Will that appear on the SRS as well?
So SRS itself, we don't have a requirement for the partners or for our software to support touch on the front of room screens. So that's not a function that we support now, and that's really not even in the roadmap. Part of the core strategy around the device was to use commodity screens and not like super expensive touch screens. So not in the plan, but what we do want to do is if there's an app like a whiteboard app running on some other device, we do want to make sure it's visible in the room. And so we're going to work on a solution to let you see that on the front of room. You won't be able to just go up and write though.
Okay, cool, thanks.
Yep.
Thank you.
But here.
The original Skype or Link Room Systems, what's on the roadmap for them to make them like these?
Yeah, good question. So the original, what was Link Room Systems, became Skype Room Systems V1. We are right now working on bringing that device to SRS V2. So it'll be a Windows 7 to Windows 10 update. It'll include all the current, everything I showed yesterday and today for Skype Room Systems. All those features will move to the Link Room Systems device. So we're basically upgrading it to a modern room system. And because of that, it'll also get Teams support because the Skype Room Systems will be gaining support. So you'll get that automatically for Link. So these kind of older Link machines are going to be moved to the future in Teams.
Will it continue to do whiteboard?
So no, they won't continue to do whiteboard because Skype Room Systems doesn't have whiteboard functionality in it like that did. So if you have a front of room screen that people do use actively for whiteboarding, it's an optional update. You probably wouldn't want to update it. That would mean it can't join Teams. But if it's a heavily used whiteboard environment, we won't have a solution for that.
Shame.
We are looking at it. It is a shame. We are looking at it. And I can't promise we will actually ever get it to work. Those screens generally aren't capacitive touch screens. Drivers on Windows 10 aren't there right now. And even if they were, the Skype Room System software itself doesn't have a front of room whiteboard experience. So it's not like an easy feature to light up. But we are looking at it.
Okay, thanks.
If I might add, if you go to the Crestron booth out on the floor, they actually have what they're calling the RL3, which is an RL2 with the software upgrade. It's just a pre-release copy, but it kind of shows you the concept of how it'll look.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, very excited to hear the Lenovo and HP now going to support the hardware. Mm-hmm. But what I heard is the Lenovo is not a Surface-based.
That's correct.
So the question is, since it's not a Surface-based, means I could port over the SRS into any PC hardware?
Okay, so your question is, since there are now non-Surface machines that are Skype Room Systems, does that mean I can make any PC a Skype Room System? So that answer is no, and there are some good reasons why. So when we work with partners, we have a specification that they must meet to hit the certification requirements that David described before. And some of those are not just a matter of like a high enough performing processor. Two things in particular. We need HDMI ingest. Most PCs aren't going to have HDMI ingest built in. So there's going to be a dongle or something else that you have to buy to do that. And that would open up kind of a new certification category that we would have to work with. The other is presence and motion or presence sensing in the room for power management. For this to be in many countries, to be a certified room system device, it has to meet power regulatory rules that mean the device shuts down, the screens shut off when there's nobody in the room using it. We have to meet that requirement. And so all of the folks that we work with, all the partners that we work with, build these presence sensors into the device, and we integrate it in the software, so that must be there. So because really of those two, and really to guarantee that our experience is the one that we designed and works the right way in each room, we limit availability to the OEMs that we're working with. So it was a very long version of no.
All right, thanks.
One additional thing to add there, in the same way that we check the audio devices to enable audio offload, we also do a hardware check as part of our boot sequence to determine that the right compute hardware is present as well. So just so you know.
Can we go in the back here?
Yeah, hello. So, Wasim, you talked about the provisioning tool that's going to be available soon. Is that going to be available for on-prem deployments as well?
So currently we are working on a cloud-based provisioning tool or device management tool. Initially it's going to be for online, but yes, the longer roadmap is to support all phones, including on-prem as well. Today, partners have their own solutions, or because they have a device IP phone management solution that can do that.
Then another question, how do I get notified when a new device has been added or even removed from the certified hardware list?
So we have a device catalog or partner device catalogs where you can see all the certified devices and basically for online or on-prem or which environment. That's where we keep it regular, including the firmwares, which firmwares are the minimum requirements and what is currently supported.
Right, but right now I have to go into that page almost every month, let's say, to do a check. Is there a way that I can get notified that something was added or even removed?
So usually, we don't have that today. We don't have a proactive announcement, but this is something we're looking for, yes.
Okay. Then, David, you showed us some examples of meeting rooms from small to large. Most of the examples that you showed shows a very long meeting room table, but unfortunately in my organization we have a lot of very large U-shaped meeting room configuration. So what would be the best solution for that?
I think the main thing you want to look at is the distance from the microphone to the talker, as opposed to the table size.
Okay.
Yeah.
And one last question. If I understood you correctly, we will soon be seeing Skype certified DSP mixers. Is that right?
Yeah, we're working on the spec right now. I'd say in the next few months we'll publish a spec, and we'll start looking at certifying actual DSP mixers themselves.
Okay. Yeah.
And we'll post that on TechNet when it's available.
Okay, sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello. Hi. We deployed the Logitech Smart Deck on Microsoft accounts. It works pretty good. We love it. The challenge in our organization is the SRS do not support multi-factor modern auth today with MFA and ping federation. When will that feature be available for SRS systems?
So the question was about when Skype Room Systems would support multi-factor auth for the system account?
Yeah, start with modern auth followed by the multi-factor authentication.
Yeah, so I mean we do have that in our backlog. I mean it is something that we're looking at. It's not super early, and yeah, that's a good point. So that we may land that feature for Teams, and our timeline basically is kind of over the next 6 months or so. We would land that Teams, the beginning of our Teams tap availability. So you may see it light up then. The use case for that, though, is a little, I'm not clear. Would you use certificate auth or something? There's no user involvement when the machines boot, right?
Yeah, so the resource accounts need to be, for our environment right now, have to authenticate. It does not do that because we have modern auth in the middle where ping federation comes into place in the middle of that.
Okay.
So redirection is not happening and the pop-ups are not coming, so we can't re-authenticate again.
Yeah.
This gentleman's been waiting here.
Oh, okay. Yeah, over in the blue. Sorry.
All right. We're facing a real a large deployment, and we're struggling to make an image that we can deploy with SCCM, but we are not getting any guidelines from you how to do it, how to succeed with that. That will be an improvement from your side lend that to us. So pretty much, yeah, I've seen some posts on forums. Folks are trying to do this by themselves. So some guidelines from you there would be helpful.
Yeah, so actually, if we could talk maybe after the session and point you to some resources for that. But I think it's fair feedback in general that the process is still quite complicated. We can do something to make that simpler. But yeah, can we follow up after on some of the specific problems you're seeing? And I think we have to, if you want to come up, we can address the questions here, but we have to.
After the session. Yep.
Yeah, we have to end.
Yep.
Thank you all for coming, and don't forget the evaluation forms. Thanks.